Today's, excuse me.
Oh, today's agenda, 9 a.m., review commissioners' agenda and consent agenda items. 9:15, briefing among commissioners. 9:30, legislative update with Zack Kennedy with Potts and Associates. 10 a.m., update planning, Director Pete Palmer. 11, executive session.
Okay. Sounds good.
And then tomorrow.
So we want a motion to approve the agenda changes this morning?
Well, hold on just a second. Tomorrow we don't have any changes, is that true? Other than the bid opening is not, so the bid opening is not going to be at 11. So you're just going to put update public works on there, is that true?
Yep. Which normally happens at 11. So, Isabel and Emily just joined.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to reread today's agenda so they can hear.
Okay.
9 a.m. review commissioners' agenda and consent agenda items. 9:15 briefing of commissioners. 9:30 legislative update, Potts and Associates. 10 a.m. update planning director Pete Palmer. 11 a.m. contingent on David getting back to us, executive session. And then tomorrow, there will be no bid opening at 11. Instead, we'll go right into Public Works update with Josh Thompson. And
sounds good to me.
The rest of the day as planned.
Yep.
Consent agenda looks good.
Okay.
I would move to approve the amended agenda.
Second. The motion and a second to approve the agenda amendments. All in favor, say aye.
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 Could we do that every morning on Monday?
I would like to. That's kind of where I was headed with it, because there's all these expectations when people read the agendas and
I know.
they plan their days around it. So I do too, by the way. So when there's changes, I hiccup.
Yep.
So sometime next week, if the rest of the board is interested in doing this, somewhere along in there, I would like to take about an hour, one of the 2 days next week, just in anticipation of going over our exempt segregation and subdivision ordinance. You know,
Yeah.
and I've been spending quite a little time looking at the details of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if we looked at all those collectively, we may have our answer that we would all agree on, probably.
And I think today, after this executive session, we may have more information that we could,
Yeah,
think about.
It's there's a lot of moving parts, and some of these things are things that have been changed over time in the our code, and there's some inconsistencies. Planning commission description and those kind of things as well, and that whole section on the Oroville regional planning organization deserves some discussion, because we may want to act on that. Yeah. But just one real important point on that one is that the first, it authorizes having one of those, it doesn't require. So it doesn't have a shall have one.
There was another thing that I read in there was that I believe that the commissioners back then had said planning will appoint, or not appoint, but planning will have a planner that deals directly with that group.
Mm-hmm.
But I read nowhere in the old resolution where it was planning for the city of Oroville. It was what I believe was planning for the urban growth area.
Mm-hmm.
Basically where there's two. Now that would have been something you would probably know a lot about. And
we never, actually, I didn't, because actually I just discovered it in the code years ago.
Oh, okay.
And
So,
saw that, and I went, well, I wonder what, and And so I always poked at the planners on that one.
I was wondering, was the remand and reload, was that in the county at one point in time back in the 80s? How do you remember when that was annexed? 'Cause I was curious if it had to do with kind of that industrial area and annexation.
Whatever year that was, probably is worth looking at, because back in the 80s, there was also a effort to have more economic development planning up north, and so you can see all this reference to all this participation
stuff.
And there was an organization then called NOSED.
What was it called?
NOSED. So there used to be OSED. That was the Economic Alliance. That organization was called OSED. It was Oklahoma County Economic Development Council. And then there was this focus on the north end, because a lot of people up that way felt like there wasn't that attention given up to the north end. So they created the North Oklahoma County Economic Development. And that was another nonprofit, and they called it NOSED, and it survived for a few years. But in the state of Washington, you'd have really one economic development organization for each county radio. Yeah. And so that kind of went away. Remember, Don Votter actually was the head of that thing. And, it transitioned out. And it doesn't, that added resources didn't make. So I'm wondering if, in fact, that was developed during that time, because of all those references, and I can tell you what year it was. But my intent back in my days for the cities up north was to just bring attention to the county that they probably should rescind the ordinance unless, because there's that almost caused for more resources to the planning commission itself, the way it was written.
Yeah, I mean, I
1986
was when it got annexed.
No, that was when this ordinance was adopted. I think.
No, I know, because the resolution was in '86. But I was curious.
I think remand and reload had been in for a long time. It's pretty easy to find out through the assessor's office, because typically they write on the edges of the boundary when it was annexed.
I was just thinking that because you had so much industrial stuff kind of going on right in that area, if the commissioners were really concerned about the expansion out that way, and that's why they were doing this and saying, hey, we need a planner to,
That might have been in mind, but the expansion that was really going on was up north of that, yes.
There could be resolutions associated with remand and reload. I know Commissioner Andy Lampe and Bud Holver and Mary Lou Peterson were talking about it quite a bit in the early 2000s when I was first started here. There was some strong discussions about the 97 corridor being able to sustain some of the larger trucks.
Heavy haul.
For the heavy haul, and so remand Reload was talked about quite a bit in those conversations.
So in that period of time, and because Andy Lampe and I,
nope, not me.
It wasn't Andy anyway.
Yeah, it was.
So Andy and I went to Olympia together on those very issues, and it was actually Oroville remand and reload. It was the establishment of the heavy freight corridor, right? And that was what was going on then. Yeah. But prior to that,
this has nothing. The discussion that we have going on right now with that ordinance, I think, is kind of outside of that anyway.
But prior to that was also the North 97 rezone, which you spoke to something about development and capacity up north. And
North 97 rezone?
Yeah, that's a rezone that was done between Oroville and the border. And that was initiated by people in the area.
Now, is that county? How far is it?
It's in the county. It was a county rezone. But again, the people that were participating on the planning commission were from outside the county. A lot of them lived in North 97, that corridor. And so the city's been doing a lot of planning around those areas because they took over their water system. way before that. And so then there was the development out there that occurred in the county that was being supported by the city's water system.
So my thought was, if we had a joint planner that was planning for the city of Oroville, they were paying for half of it, and we were paying for half of it, that person would know what was going on with the city of Oroville. So it would be, you know, we wouldn't have the planning commission, but there would be a planner that intimately knew what was going on with.
You'd be working with the planning commission part of the time.
Yeah.
And the planning commission is most of the time dealing with the growth factors outside the planning commission, with the exceptions from zoning issues happening down.
Correct.
But the industrial area, this part right over here was annexed. You referenced your question. This way and all the way to the river. That was annexed in the 2000s, early, I think. So was the lumber company annexed to the city.
Yeah.
Because they wanted the water, because they were looking at when was the energy crisis and the cogen thing. So they needed the water for the cogen, and so they, in fact, and they extended a water line out there. I mean, a bigger water line, but they needed it for firefighting capability as well. So that's what that.
So on another note, I watched the demonstration of our well tracking software. I think it's going to be really good. We're going to be able to, basically for 48, we're going to be able to send Ecology our report of, you know, water usage. But in that, there is some, you know, some numbers that need to be utilized. And so Friday, I actually met with MVCC to talk about some science-related things, like what kind of data and where we were going to get the information was for some strictly scientific, you know, things. And I brought up the fact that, you know, Aspect has done their well water withdrawal report in 2011 for 48 and had come up with the fact that in the summertime, in July, 710 gallons of water was consumptively used on average on a household. And that was very specific to Wire 48 because they actually sampled different properties within each reach and satellite imaged their yard size and things like that. So it's a very specific, you know, withdrawal rate for us.
Yes.
But my belief is that the reserve was not set up as an average reserve. It was an instantaneous number, right? So that means that we have to use the highest demand per day that you can, because in July, it's going to be that number of houses using that amount of water.
Correct.
And so I was kind of going over, hey, what could the county provide as far as, you know, numbers of properties, what, you know, there's some information that we don't have a very good grasp on, and we'd have to talk to the assessor, but it's the number of, you know, wells that are in use in Wire 48. And so we were talking about, okay, can you make an assumption that, or do you make an assumption that anything over, on the tax rolls, anything that has a $10,000 or greater improvement value, we're just going to say is using water? Because there's not a lot of places where you can derive good data to make assumptions for
10,000.
Yeah, I mean, and so it would be like, you know, okay, if they got a garage, it's full boat water. So, and that's something that we have to basically address.
Well, that, you know, just the detail that you just brought up would probably, you know, could be verifiable just through going through a few of them, seeing what that $10,000 association turned out to look like.
I mean, it's over there. $10,000 doesn't go very far.
Right.
So I mean, it's like if you had a little chicken barn, you know, then you might have a $10,000 improvement value, but you're probably using water because there's animals there.
I think shops too.
Yeah.
A lot of shops built that have RVs inserted inside them too.
So anyway, we had a good discussion. There is the, you know, kind of this notion of trying to get, they may have sent, let's see here. We talked about the fact that, you know, a watershed update costs about $500,000, and that Department of Ecology may not have that money at this point in time to be able to you know, help us coordinate something like that, but that we could possibly go. So here's something that Jasmine, who was the head of MVCC, because we were talking about, okay, how do we get like everybody on board with this and let them know that we want to try to get funding to go through this watershed update. So this is kind of just a draft, and I want to know what you two think of it, so that we could possibly send this on to the legislators. So this says the Met Hot Water, and again, this is the draft. Okay, so it says the Met Hot Watershed, WIRA 48, is facing new challenges in light of a growing population, seasonal water shortages, declining fish populations, and increased demand for affordable housing. Additionally, the Attorney General very recently clarified, which I don't know that I want to use that word in there. Again, this is draft. The Attorney General recently gave an interpretation, would be my words, of the 1976 Methow in-stream flow rule, leaving hundreds of lot owners. This says without legal access to water. I would put something like, you know, there are questions. Maybe we should just take that sentence out and just say there are many questions based on an Attorney General opinion. There now arises, you know, many questions as to legally available water within the watershed. To address these issues, Okanagan County and several representatives of organizations engaged in water issues are requesting a $500,000 budget request for the Department of Ecology to initiate a stakeholder process. The purpose is to understand and address competing needs for water and to inform realistic land use planning for the next 10 to 20 years of growth while meeting the community's vision. Funding would support a 1 to 2 year process led by a professional facilitator, the collection and evaluation of data to inform a watershed plan update, land use plans, and the development of a mitigation program for affected parties.
One just really minor detail is back up to where the Attorney General opinion is. I would say that the Department of Ecology's office of the Attorney General, rather than the Attorney General himself, because I'm making that point. I made that point to a news reporter the other day when they talked about the AG's opinion. I said, well, but you know, that's from the AG's office, but it's the Ecology's AG.
Yeah, the attorneys general for DOE. Assistant attorneys general.
Yeah, they're assistant to the
Alan
AG.
Reichman.
Right.
Alan Reichman.
I think he's the senior AG in that office, is what I thought I read.
So I mean, this is the only way that I can see. I mean, you know, I think everybody knows that I would like to be conservative. I'd like to know. I'd like to just have a good rule and good planning, and we don't.
Sure.
And so I think that right now, with all of the questions that are going on, all of the uncertainty that we have, all the uncertainty that people have, right now with all the things that, I mean, if you think about DOE, every time they've handed down an opinion to us or something to us, it has changed dramatically what the landscape looks like, what the zoning landscape looks like, what you can do with properties, things like that. It's really tough for people and for us as a county to be able to deal with that. And so this, could hopefully get us to a point like with Wire 49, where we know, okay, we got a 20-year time period. We know, roughly how many houses are going in, and we got, water that we're need to mitigate for.
You're speaking to the choir here, but yes, I would, because I agree with him. I've agreed with you for a long time in that respect, or you're agreeing with me, one or the other. But yes, I agree 100%. That's a process that we have to kick into play. The other process is to go to court and have them define it, and I don't think we want to do that necessarily, because you don't know what the end result is either in this process either. But at least in this process, it doesn't come down and then change water law in the rest of the state too. At the same time. Reading this,
do you have an opinion on that? On the Wire 49 and going, or on 48 and going through watershed update or anything?
Yeah. No, I agree with what you're saying. Yeah.
Okay. We're going to
stop for a second here. I'm going to ask Melissa to look at the AV capture because it has not been producing the sound in the cell.
You know what? I got that too. Somebody told me that too, that they couldn't.
I went and looked at it, and it was like we had a whole day conversation, and it was you could hear us going.
Yeah.
So if she could just check once in a while.
Yeah. Melissa?
Excuse me.
Karen?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Crystal. Oh.
That's, I think what he was talking about.
Yep. She's just going to glance at it once in a while.
Okay.
So,
Zach just joined.
Hey, Zach?
I'm here.
Brent? We hear you.
How you doing, sir?
Tell us something good.
Oh, I gotta go back in my notes. Hold on.
To find something good.
Well, I've got some good things, but they don't really have anything to do with you guys. No.
Figures.
So, yeah, it's an interesting year this year, gentlemen. It's a lot going on up in Olympia. Well, very little going on in actually Olympia, but quite a lot going on behind the scenes. It's really, really interesting. No sense in mixing words. I mean, the Democrats are in control, both the House, the Senate, the governorship, and they're really being restrictive on what you're seeing go to committee, what's getting heard. One, I think, exception was the 5114, which was reopening Washington. That one, they heard that bill, and that's when they had thousands of people signed up in support of. And, they planned on having an executive session and I think voting no. And then all of a sudden they're like, we don't have time to get to it. And that bill, they haven't heard a word about it since then. So obviously it flies right in the face of the governor and his directives. A positive note on that stuff, though, it really looks like the regional health district thing is, for right now, probably dead. We've got cutoff coming up here next week on Wednesday, I believe. It's the 15th, and that's the policy cutoff to get bills out of the committee of origin. With that, we're going to see, even by then, there's really not that many bills on the hearing list. It's really interesting kind of what we're having to deal with, but we're to kind of be in the naysayers, right? Kind of the party of no, I guess. And we're trying to come in here and show as much support as we possibly can for our legislators and obviously any positions that, you guys have or your constituents have. It's really important that we let our constituents know that they can get online and they can log in and they can participate, because I can tell you right now, the other side is whether they got a dog in the fight or not. And so it's really difficult for the legislators, when they're in a committee and they don't actually get to see all these people coming in to testify. And, people can sign up from quite literally all over the world to testify. Not saying people are, but they definitely can. They can submit their pro or con statement. And so a lot of the constituents are supporting a lot of the legislation that's coming out of the, out of the big cities, to be entirely honest. And some of it is completely innocent. When you've lived in a city your whole life and never really been outside and seen a dirt road, it's really difficult to understand what we deal with out here in the rural areas. And so there's some things that just get missed. Just hands down, there's not much, there's no malice there at all. You just get missed. There are some other things that are pretty detrimental to what we're trying to do, and running our counties. And, some of the stuff that we're watching, obviously the PILT is something we're watching real well. The coalition seems to be doing pretty well on that. A couple of the other things that I would draw attention to in the email that I would look at finance at 1:30 on Tuesday. That's the 1410. That's Mike Volz's bill out of Spokane. You might want to talk to your treasurer about it, see kind of what the feedback is. It goes back into taxes and, property taxes and things like foreclosure. Something to ask your treasurer. It's not the same bill, but it's close.
Tuesday next week?
That is Tuesday, like as in tomorrow at 1:30 in finance.
Okay. Well, we might see her tomorrow.
There you go. Some of the other stuff, a lot of the stuff in terms of the titles, a lot of the stuff is really not necessarily, bad or good in many cases. What we're really seeing and the things that we're watching out for right now are kind of like I was saying, well, here's a bill that does these things that all sound good. And then all of a sudden there's something sideways in the back of it that really requires a GMA amendment, or, something that requires non-planning GMA or counties that don't plan for GMA to incorporate something in housing, or border management or something like that. So we're really having to kind of comb through this stuff with a fine-tooth comb. The one positive on that, I'm full of positive information, I guess, this week, aren't I? The positive on that is the state doesn't have any money. And I think the legislators have realized that there's a limit to what taxation they can put on the people before the people start voting and saying, no, we're done with this. So, I think the most visible one is the gas tax, and talking about all these little things they're sneaking in the back. If there's a fiscal note attached to something, it's having a heck of a time moving. And we've seen that in a lot of the criminal justice stuff, criminal justice reform. We've seen that in a lot of the housing stuff, and it's just kind of what we're seeing. And the gas tax, I've learned recently from DOT that we are right now sitting at number 4 in the nation for the highest gas tax. If the gas, carbon tax, all that stuff were to go through, we would definitely be at number 1. We'd add at least 18 cents. So, I think just in general, you get outside of Seattle and people really are pretty opposed to that. Anybody that has to drive more than a mile to work is going, I don't think so. The other thing that I would bring your attention to, and we're not sure what's going to happen with this one, and WASAC's working on it. More than monitoring, but really trying to put some weight behind this one is House Bill 1477. That's up hearing today at 10. We're going to see what happens on that one. But what that one is, that 988 number. So it's like 911, but 988. It's a mental health line mandated by the feds. The kicker on this one is the mandate requires that it be separate from your 911 call center. So you need a whole new call center. And the mandate doesn't go into effect until mid-year next year. So we could literally go through next session and still deal with this issue. The problem with this bill is that it's kind of put together in a really haphazard way, and they didn't really talk to any of the stakeholders. I'm guessing you guys probably never got a call asking about how your 911 call center works or anything, and how 988 could work. So that's kind of our.
question that comes up in that regard is that, number one, is it then a requirement that dispatch run the 9882?
Well, and that's,
the county
that's
the behavioral health organization.
Well,
Because
and I think the credit question is if something happens on that 988 number that would require emergency service, either police, fire, paramedics, something like that, who makes that call? Because that's your dispatchers at your 911 call center. So the proposal, and I know they've talked about it a lot at WASAC, really is just to set up a call center, bare minimum, and do the study for this year. I think the fiscal note may kill it.
Yeah.
How it goes.
Yeah, that again, you're right about that. Applying it for each county, because some counties have a good system of mental health, emergency hotlines, and some may not.
Well, and then you beg the question of, in terms of first responders, if they're dispatched from the mental health line, do you have to have a first responder that's trained in, conflict resolution, mental health training, mental health response training? And is there additional liability there? So there's a lot of questions around it. It sounds good, but the bill is horribly written. And so we're trying to gut it down to, we'll put a phone somewhere and we need to study this to figure out how to implement it right. So, and as you guys know, some of you were around here as they were redoing the 911 call system. There was a big push to centralize, the state's 911 dispatch. Maybe need to, or maybe cause to address this issue with a centralized call and dispatch. That's one of the things that I think we'd like to look at as we study this over the interim. And I'm not one by any means to say, hey, let's do a study. But in this case, to implement it properly, I think the study would be the best way to do it, especially since there's, the federal mandate doesn't come down for another year and a half. So we've got plenty of time. So with that, did you guys have any questions?
One thing I might mention is, you mentioned something about the some requirements that they kind of come through growth management, but they end up looking like they apply to partially planning counties.
Yep.
One to watch out for is the other way around, where they authorize something for planning counties and they leave out the non-planning counties because it's growth management, yet there's an opportunity for partially planning counties to take advantage of whatever they've created. And I've seen that happen over the years where you go, oh, but that's only accessible to those planning under the Growth Management Act.
And that's a very good point. We have seen a little bit of that this year. A lot of that's been kind of centered around fiscal flexibility. And realistically, there's only a couple of fiscal flexibility components that are actually useful to us. And even then, when they're useful, it's questionable, because in order to take advantage of these fiscal flexibility tools, we in essence have to kind of abandon some of the other principles that we as counties have really held to. For example, unfunded mandates. They say, well, we'll give you more fiscal flexibility, but in order to take advantage of that, we have to say, okay, well, this must not be an unfunded mandate because now we have the tool to be able to fund it. We just didn't raise taxes locally enough. That kind of catch-22.
It affects your argument. Yeah,
exactly. And so, on a lot of those are the ones where it's like, well, if it goes through or not, whether it's for planning or non-planning or, fully planning or whatever, we're not going to touch it. It's like, okay, you gave us a tool and we really don't want the tool. So we're going to tell you we don't want the tool to start out. So you can't say you gave us the tool. And it's kind of the same thing that we've been talking about. It's just a big circle, right?
Right.
So that's kind of, that's really where we are. I can tell you right now, what we're looking at is a very bumpy road. And I may sound like a broken record on this one, but community involvement and constituency involvement is huge this year. Because as you can imagine, you know, you have these committee members sitting at home or in their local courthouses or wherever they can get good service and be on a public link. And they can't see the people. They see people that are testifying and stuff, but they don't see that the hearing room isn't full and people are just signing in. All they see is numbers. You know, they see, wow, 500 people supported this bill and there's only, 32 who opposed it. And all 32, they're from their county commissioners, they're the association of counties, county officials, lobbyists. Wow, the public really want this. We're going to vote for it. And that makes it difficult. Is something that does harm the county or make things difficult for us down on a local level does come through committee. It makes it hard for our members on the floor to really get much action behind it, because the other members are going to look at it and go, well, nobody signed in opposed to it. There's overwhelming support. And so that is happening. So I just say again, any community support that you guys might be able to work up, or, community involvement. I guess it's not even support, just community involvement. Some of the counties are using their Facebook page to let people know they can participate. Some of them have other alert systems, bulletin boards. I mean, everybody does it differently, obviously, but we're in that era where people can watch it on their cell phone. And obviously that's a lot easier in King County than it is in Okanagan County. Heck, I live in rural Spokane County, and I just feel lucky that I get to talk to you guys right now. My service is that fantastic, believe me.
Yeah, thank you.
So,
Hey, Zach.
Yes, sir.
I got an email from a friend of mine on the coast that watches a lot of activity on these Senate and House bills, and he sent me an email. I'll probably forward it to you.
Okay.
It's concerning House Bill 1202, Senate Bill 5051, House Bill 1054, and House Bill 1310 and House Bill 1276. It's all to do with, there's some dangerous verbiage in there to do with law enforcement, what they're trying to do with law enforcement. And then House Bill 1054, they've got a clause in there that says one of its policies seeks to eliminate K-9 units.
That is correct. That 1054 is the criminal justice reform kind of all encompassing bill. That's the one that would quite literally strip law enforcement professionals of tools they have to do the job. That one would do a lot of different stuff. Also require the law enforcement agencies to turn over their rocket launchers, which I don't know how they'll do their job without their rocket launchers.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see how far it goes.
Right.
We're pretty surprised to see that it has made it to rules. Don't know if it's going to get a pull. I know there is a lot of opposition to this from the police and sheriffs associations, as well as individual police and sheriffs, and quite a few communities around the state. It's very, very detrimental. So, it's tough. I think what we're going to see in terms of the criminal justice reform this year is really going to come down to resources for officers, whether that's counseling services or training and things like that. And then probably some use of force guidelines changes. They're really leaning hard on community involvement. So, community policing, community oversight on a lot of these things, kind of on everything. They're trying to insert community members into everything. And, you know, while that might work for the urban centers or even some of the, like Ellensburg, I wouldn't call it an urban center, but they have more people, you know, and a lot of this stuff that we've looked at, whether it's Riccelli's bills on the health departments and regionalizing the health districts, or telling you who you have to have on your regional or your local health board or local board of health, you know, there's just not the people, and people are busy. And in the rural areas, if you have, maybe you have a doctor on a board or a police officer on the board and, you know, a community policeman or whatever, and something happens, maybe there's a baby being delivered or a car accident, all of a sudden you're hamstrung and you can't do anything because you don't have a quorum. So, you know, I mean, think about in the winter, that happens all the time. You get snowed in, a snow drift, half your board could. So that's a lot of the issues that we're dealing with, and we are keeping an eye out. But I would appreciate it if you'd share that email with me, and I can kind of give you a rundown. I'll respond to you and give you a rundown on where they are and what we think is going to happen.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think one of the things too about some of that defunding stuff is it really needs to be something that's decided on a local or regional basis rather than top down, because all these criminal justice situations are different wherever you may be.
Absolutely.
We talked about the other day, you know, of course, how big Okanagan County is. And so if you talk about the resources available at the Sheriff's Department, they can be very short compared to others just because of the distance between various places that the Sheriff's deputies have to go.
Well, and I think that's something they don't understand. I mean, I clearly don't understand in the city where, you know, I mean, let's face it, a lot of these ideas come from, and the average citizen doesn't understand what a police officer really does anyway, and really goes through on a day-to-day basis. But as you look at it, I mean, you could have officers that are 30 minutes to an hour away from any help, you know, whereas in Seattle or Tacoma, I mean, they're just 30 seconds away. And yes, you get shot at a lot more in Tacoma and Seattle, but if something does happen out in Okanagan County, your deputy could be in deep trouble with no help.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we do everything we can to not get caught in, you know, some sort of a regulation or a rule that would affect your local deputies that need a dog or, you know, need heavier equipment just to protect themselves because they're alone. So, well, I look forward to seeing that. Did you guys, oh crap, I went a little bit over. I apologize about that. Did you guys have any questions or thoughts?
Not at the moment. You know, and then weekly I do have discussions with the LSC, of course, on the various bills. We get a pretty good rundown on some of those that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've been working with Juliana quite a bit on quite a few of these bills, trying to make sure that we get them in a state that actually is not harming us too bad. So. Okay, and then when there's testimony that might be helpful, you know, we are in session on Monday and Tuesdays, but if we know in advance, you know, we might be able to even arrange to do it during the session. Okay. Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. I mean, you could testify as a board. There are provisions for that. Yep, they might like it just because not that many people do. That is correct. Okay, I have not seen a county commission do that yet. Yeah. All right. Well, sounds good. Thank you very much. As always, call, email anytime. I'm available, and we will be in touch. Good night. Right. Thanks. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Zach.
Bye.
You know, on the letter you were working on, Commissioner Hover, the letter you were working on for funding. We talked about why we were doing it. You might add one thing, and I didn't catch if it was in there or not, but it would be to also inform the legislature. You know, the study and the information that we collect is to inform the legislature where the community sits on various issues. Yeah. Because I know on the bills that, and especially the bill that Representative Gaynor worked on in regards to out-of-basin transfers, he was constantly, going, well, I want to make sure I understand what the people in either one of these wireless feel about it. It's like you said, he didn't want to step on anybody's toes to introduce legislation, and that's going to be a tough one on out-of-basin transfers. Right. And then on the out-of-basin transfer comments, you got the word about that consultation decision that was made probably then. Nope. So I contacted Sage Park and said that I was going to send her an email.
Wait. Are we talking about I'm sorry, when you were saying out-of-basin transfers, I thought you were talking about Representative Gaynor's stuff. You were talking about the water rights request for application for water rights. Yeah, yes, Crown. I did get that we were going to do a consultation.
But I called her first and talked to her a little bit about it and asked her the significance of the email to her, and so I included some information in that email that then she turned around and they had actually then made a decision to go to consultation with the governments. And gives us time. Otherwise, the reason I called was because we were going to have to pay a $50 fee and to get in on that. And
I saw that, and I actually called her as well and said, why is it that a county government has to pay to make a comment like this? It's just the format.
So anyway, it turned out good. So I just thought I'd share what you already know. I figured you already know, probably for Jim's benefit. But once we get our collective selves together, it might be good to have a news release to explain that situation to the public and no matter how long what's going on, rather than have the ball have to constantly contact the planning department to get their questions answered. I think there's a few we could do in a news release because we don't do that often enough. Then that way we're not waiting for the questions to be asked. We're actually telling what we want to be told. Very good. Good idea.
Also, I might remind the board to lean into your mics rather closer than you have been. There's some
lean in rather than lean back.
Sound issues being relayed this morning, and until we get them fixed.
Are we having? She talked about whether she could hear us or not.
She hasn't said anything yet.
Okay. I'm going to check with her every once in a while. I asked her to.
I can barely hear you. But
really?
So.
Well, 6 foot distancing is hard to do with these mics, but I don't want to be that close to Commissioner.
Trying to keep this on, and it's tough because it's always muffling everything anyway.
The other thing to do has to do with chairs. Oh, maybe my stomach. Get right up there. But I listened to it, I guess last week to try to answer some questions that were being asked, and maybe like, what did we talk about there? And I couldn't hear us. I could hear you when you came out and talked into the microphone, and Angie too. And well, but if you sit here all day, it's hard to go like this.
I wonder if you can turn the gain up on the mics.
I think that helps. It says you are quite clear on Zoom with no headphones needed. It's not the masks. Somebody sent a cartoon out and it said, "Just show the
sky." Is she talking to me?
No, I think she's talking to all of us. I saw a cartoon that came out here today, and somebody was standing there talking to their dog, saying, "Sit, do this, do that," and the dog wasn't doing what he wanted. He goes, "Darn masks." It's easy to blame everything on the mask.
So I gave Crystal some speakers so that she can hear. It's coming out of her computer speakers on the actual box, which is sitting behind her desk on the floor, and it just sounds like. So we're putting some speakers so that they're right next to her, and she'll be able to hear
Yeah.
better.
That's great, because then at least once in a while she can be right there and she can tell you. She could
Right.
just take a glance at it every once in a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that, that might help. But our capability might be different than other people as well. But at least we can say it's working for us.
Right. True story. But I did listen to it on my own computer at home, and I couldn't hear it.
And you couldn't hear
No,
it?
I couldn't hear it on my own. And, you know, I usually can hear it. I can tell the difference. I can go back to each day, in fact, and some days it worked. So it may be what the settings of the mics are, I don't know.
Or where you guys are sitting in
Yes.
in your chair.
Mm-hmm. Like I say, I'm gonna have to take a bungee cord and hold myself up.
You just have to be better. Moving closer to your mic when you speak. I think that's probably the best.
Yeah, it is. I was just commenting on the fact that sometimes it's hard to be here all day and sit here right here.
It is hard.
It's hard on your back. So whatever we can do.
Well, at some point we'll be able to move those mics closer to you rather than you moving closer to the mic.
Yes, that's better.
Good morning.
Morning. Good morning.
This is Pete Palmer, the Director of Planning and Development. Got a pretty quick agenda again today. First thing is the aspect contract change. I talked to you a little bit about that last week. This has been reviewed by Getches now, and it is ready for approval and signature by the board.
We have it. Lee. Awesome. So this is a change to the scope of work and moving some money around within line items of a grant, correct?
Correct. It's not adding any additional dollars to the grant. It's just using what's already left over and assigning it for tasks.
Okay. So this is a $23,900, basically just amendment within the contract, correct?
Correct.
I think this would be, okay. So I would move to approve the contract amendment between Okanagan County and Aspect Consulting in the amount of $23,900 and authorize the chair to sign.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 The next thing I have is the shared planner agreement with the city of Oroville. We sent the proposal up to them, which was the draft agreement that Getches had reviewed. They went over it last Wednesday, and evidently it was tabled. And what they were questioning is under Okanagan County Code 2.66. It talks about the Oroville Regional Planning Advisory Commission. Within that code, it also talks about the county assigning a county planner to assist the Regional Advisory Commission, which is basically doing planning in the urban areas around Oroville rather than within the city of Oroville. So we're kind of going back and forth to get that straight and discuss the differences between what the planner would be doing with the city of Oroville compared to what this code section is talking about. I went clear back through because it was kind of alarming to me to know that we've had another planning commission within Okanagan County, and it's also a regional planning commission, same as what the county planning commission is. So I tried to go through Laserfish and pull up some past resolutions, and the one that I found was clear back in '86. where there was a 6-member board created at that time, but I'm not finding any additional work, that they've done or any additional assignments since then as far as people on this board. When I talked to Angie about it, she kind of indicated that the last time she remembers the board actually doing anything and referred to Commissioner Branch as probably knowing more of the history than she does, but she said was when they did the airport planning and some of that around the city of Oroville. So it's been a while, and maybe that's something we want to revisit at a later date. But I just kind of want to give you an update on what's going on with the shared planner in the city of Oroville.
I would propose a change, and I think Commissioner Branch alluded to this also. I would propose a change to that section of code, because I think that this whole, the whole county needs to get treated equal. I think that as a planning commission, we have representatives from all over, and not having, these different regional planning, Okanagan County regional specific planning commissions.
Yeah, I'm similar, because there's different codes here that we have that refer to planning commissions and even have the definition of planning commission, like the subdivision code. And I think we need to go back through all that stuff and clean it out, because and that's true with different codes in here. This was adopted by resolution. I think that if you go back to the code, which is ordinance, and it's back in 71 when they established the planning commission under 3670, there's one part of it, it's in compliance, I think, with 3670, and it says area advisory committees of sufficient number to provide the planning commission with adequate sources of advice and counsel on matters pertaining to specific areas within the county are established.
Yeah.
And that reference to one of the most recent ones includes the airport work, which we had groups at every airport in the county, in fact, and that satisfied that advisory committee thing. What's been established under that code that you're talking about, and I think you're absolutely right, Pete, is that it created a regional planning advisory commission, and it gets a little bit too far out there in terms of establishing that. Plus, I think under that one, it also says that a planning commission is authorized, but it doesn't say anything about it's required. So that's an important part of that. I have to admit that in earlier years, I read that, and I continued to give the planners a bad time about that being on the books, and it never was removed. So I would constantly, and I think that's where maybe the mayor picked that up, is that I would constantly go, well, when are you guys going to do that? And really more the point was, why do you have that still on the books if you're not doing that? So, and I've done that here before, actually, a little bit, so we might want to rescind that. It was adopted by resolution, not ordinance. And, but somewhere in the past, I also thought I ran into something that says Oroville Planning Commission was regional, but I can't find it again. And I looked back, also, Lanie, there's a question I want to ask you in that regard too, is that you talked about the codification, and I was looking at the, I lose my voice here yelling into this thing, but I looked at the code and it says that, it says when the last update was, right? And so it says this code is good till this period of time.
It's through 18-14. So it's up to date through 18-14. So 2018-15, 2018-16 up to present have not been codified. Okay, well,
something needs to be fixed with code publishing company, because it says here that the Okanagan Code is current through ordinance 2020-7.
So they've been sent, they just must have updated that, because it didn't just...
I think they did. That's why I said, I think I saw some things that changed.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah.
I
didn't realize that they had went ahead and updated it.
Must have been very, very recent, November 2nd.
Yeah, because
2020. So just 3 months ago, 4 months ago.
That might have been when. Oh, well, this ordinance was passed November 2nd.
Mm-hmm. So it says,
2020-7.
right, so it says it's current through that point. And so they may have taken all those updates and put it in there.
Just like within the last, week.
Yeah.
Cause we've been in touch with them, until like this last week.
And that may be why, when I looked at it, I go, I thought I read, and it was different.
And so they don't have any of the 2021 ordinances.
So a suggestion I do have, and we can do that at our staff meeting, department head meetings, is that if we could ask those departments to look at what part of the code applies to them, and then report back to us whether it's valid anymore. Because I think that we'll find that it isn't in some areas. And then we could go through and update our code, because the public relies on it, or they don't rely on it, and they'll just go, well, that doesn't mean anything, we'll follow everybody up.
So that kind of brings us to another thing. When we went through the list that Lanie provided, from the code publisher to make sure that everything was published the way that it was supposed to be, we found a couple errors. There was one that was missing from 2019, but we also found that the Shoreline Master Program was never published. And then we also found an error in the cannabis code. So I'm going to be talking about that later on here in my presentation.
In your research, did you find that the Shoreline Master Program had been codified in the past in our code?
I would have to ask again, but what we found was that the most recent update in 2018 was not even in there.
Yeah, so the reason I asked the question is because sometimes I find that some jurisdictions don't, because of that joint ownership of the code. But I don't think that's the greatest reason. I think that we can do it. I just didn't remember whether or not it was ever codified before. Do you remember Shoreline Master Program?
The Shoreline, I am not sure on that. It would probably be in the code, the last publication that was updated. So if there is no shoreline at all in the code, that's been published, then, I mean, you're saying that there was no indication that the Shoreline Master Plan had ever been codified.
Well, this last update in 2018, prior to that, there was an ordinance in 2015 that talked about the transmittal to ecology. But we didn't search past that. We were just trying to find this 2018 one.
So my question was beyond what she's been explaining. It's my question was, has it ever been codified?
So to the 2015 version, it sounds like it has. But
I've never seen it in code. So if you can find it in the code book, then that would answer my question.
Okay.
So it might not have been something that would have been new. It may have been something that, not saying it shouldn't be, but it may never have been, and maybe that's why it happened. I don't know. I'm just asking.
Right. I'll research that to
okay.
See if it ever has been. So moving on, the next thing is we've had, so back in 2014, it was 2016, there was some zoning changes done to the zoning map that affected the zoning map, and one of the things it did was move some of these properties from Uplands 20 into a low-density residential. And what was brought to our attention, and it's affecting about 6 properties right there along Highway 20 in the Winthrop area. where the zoning change didn't follow the property line. It cut these properties into and zoned two pieces of the property different. So we would like to revisit these, and do a zoning map amendment. And so we've been researching on just what that would really look like. And basically what we're finding is that, one section of the code talks about the intent of the county to zone all boundaries to follow property lines. So I just wanted to kind of give you guys a heads up and let you know that we're looking more into that and how to go about, correcting this mapping error that was made. We fell with our error. And so just kind of giving you guys a heads up that we're revisiting that, and we'll be bringing that forward probably here in the near future.
And would you ask staff or you, whatever you want to do, to look at the comp plan and see if there's any provisions in the comp plan to address those kinds of zoning ministerial changes that may be necessary? I don't know if they're ministerial. Sometimes they could really affect somebody's property, but some comp plans will say these are approximate boundaries in a comprehensive plan, and you may have to make your zoning districts, follow those, but you still, when you're making the proposal for the zoning map amendment, that's when we should catch that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so I did kind of do a preliminary, just kind of a topical scan of, what the code says about not only the map amendment, but what I'm going to talk about next is also an error in the cannabis code that will require a text amendment. And our code refers us back to both for text or the map amendment through the 17A 340. And then it goes into the evaluation criteria, and it's basically processed the same as a procedural amendment for official control. So I also referenced 36-70 800, and it talks a little bit more about the procedural amendment, and the only difference between the adopting an official control and a procedural amendment is the public hearing requirement. So we're gonna, like I said, we're still kind of researching this a little more. We'll be talking to Getchus about it before we implement anything once we get all of our research done, and then we'll let you know when we're ready to kind of move forward with these. So the other one we talked about.
Let me ask you a question on that one. When you're in your research, you might think about this one, and that is policies of the comprehensive plan may be implemented by changing the official controls. And did you reference a particular statute when you said that? It was 800, was it? And that was
36-70 800, and then
that's the interim controls?
No, that's the official control.
Okay, that's all.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So then that brings me to the cannabis code next. January 1st of this year, we were required to have all of the legal pre-existing cannabis operations that existed prior to the adoption of the code to be in compliance with certain sections of the cannabis code. It talks about compliance with state laws and regulations and the conditions of their permit. And then it goes into also compliance with dust, visible emissions, fugitive volatile organic compound emissions, noise, waste disposal, lighting, and off-street parking. I don't know why they left out odor and signage, them coming into compliance with that, but that's another issue. But basically, the big thing on there is if you look at 17A 290.080, right in the last sentence, it refers to OCC 17A.290.040 B10, and that should be B8. B10 references the appeals of any violation notice. B8 references the fencing requirement. and that specific section was talking about what they needed to come into compliance with by January 1st of this year. So we would like to get that error in the code text fixed before we send out these letters of compliance, just so that we're referencing the proper code sections.
Did you look at the ordinance that established that? Did it have that mistake in it too?
I did not look at the ordinance. Actually, I have it right here. But I will go through that and look at that and see if it makes
if it doesn't have the mistake, I think code publishing company can fix it, right?
I would imagine if it's a text error in the published version versus the ordinance, then yeah.
Without any further ado, I think.
Yeah.
I did get a chance to look at 367800 though, Pete, and I see what they're saying. You don't have to have a hearing to fix those problems that you referred to earlier. As long as it doesn't impose, remove, or modify any regulation, therefore existing.
So the last thing that I have on my agenda for this morning then is, I just wanted to let you guys know that tonight the Planning Commission will be having a special meeting at 7 o'clock. We've got the Zoom information published on our website. Basically, we're going to talk a little bit about the comprehensive plan, which has gone out for public review and comments, along with the draft EIS addendum. Those comments are due on March 8th, which is also the date that the public hearing will be scheduled with the Planning Commission. We had to make a correction to the addendum to correct the dates on the fact sheet. With our cyber attack, it kind of pushed everything out an extra week. So we made that correction when it was discovered last week and resent out the stuff dates to everybody that received copies of the comprehensive plan, which was everybody that commented back in 2016 or 19 when all that was going on. So the ball's rolling, and I'm sure we're going to be getting a lot of feedback. So again, tonight will be a special planning commission meeting, and we're just going to kind of go over here's the comp plan, here's the dates that we're looking at. We're going to probably discuss a little bit as far as what the alternatives look like, and just kind of prepare ourselves for the March 8th hearing. That's all I have this morning.
Any questions or comments about that process? I guess the only one that occurs to me, and that's just a comment and a thought, thinking aloud here, is that I think option one is no, do nothing. And I don't see that as being something that the board's going to adopt. Option one, do nothing. Number two is the one we're being challenged over.
Correct.
My assessment of that is the same thing, and that's just from my perspective. So options 3 and 4 are on the table as far as I'm concerned, just to be summing it up, not stepping outside the legal process.
Yeah, option 3 is it's fairly conservative. It's kind of the favored option, I think. Option 4 was the one proposed by the Mahal Valley Citizens Council.
Do you see that as being radically different, or just with some additional stuff that we may or may not want?
Just kind of additional stuff that we may want to pick through.
Are there any parts of that that come to mind for you? We're not at the decision-making point now, but I'm just trying to prepare.
Yeah, no, I don't even, honestly, I don't even really want to get into, I don't want to discuss even how I interpret it or how I feel or anything like that, because I want the planning commission to, do their task in picking out something and giving us a recommendation. I'm just gonna leave it at that, because, if we go through and we look at something and a section doesn't appear to be something that we feel works for the county, we can modify it and actually send it back to the, there's that, the format, of, okay, this is fine, we do it, or no, we don't do anything, or we say, yeah, or this looks good, but we want to change it a little bit, and then what does that mean? So, I know that was a long answer, I apologize, but.
I understand your answer, I was just putting my toe in the water.
I mean, leave it at that to make sure that the folks on the planning commission are doing their tasks that they were assigned as far as what they feel their representation means on that, and what options they feel is good.
Thank you.
All righty, see you in a half hour.
Let's speak with the sheriff for just a few minutes.
I guess that crisis line that he's talking about, a 988 number, it's statewide. You know that what Zack was talking about? It's a statewide crisis line number.
Oh.
We have a regional one.
Mm-hmm.
But it also provides for a state director. It's another level of crisis line bureaucracy, but I haven't looked into. I was just looking at the summary of that bill, so we hadn't talked about it in LSC. I was curious what they felt about it. They may feel it isn't gonna go anywhere, but it sure is moving.
Did they come back and say that they were good for that level 5?
What's that?
Well, I was just curious if they had gotten back and said they were good for that 11 o'clock time period.
Yes.
Oh, good. Perfect.
Also, Joe Poland is out today and tomorrow. But he wanted me to let the board know that he is advertising for the temporary position that starts May 1st. They'll be gathering applications for that in April for the temporary fairground maintenance position. That was all he needed to let you know about. I sent the board several emails this morning. One is the, just so you are aware of it before tomorrow, one is the request for affordable or homeless housing funds for the GAP funding for the Meadowlark senior housing. And then the other one was
Do you need to tell us this phone number?
no, if I've got it right here.
Okay.
And the other one was the Water Conservancy Board. Alternate. Did the board want to be in here or in the conference room?
don't have an opinion on that really, and I think in the conference room makes it a little bit easier because we don't have to shut down Zoom. We're not worried about it. Anybody else have issues the board?
I don't have a preference.
So then comes through.
Hey, Chris, there's a, never mind. There's a Senate Bill 5362, regarding fairs and an appropriation of money for them. Can you make sure that you, look at those?
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. That's a Senate bill. Okay, I would move to go into executive session under 110(1)I, for a period of 1 hour. And I know, I was thinking about if we get done before an hour and we leave, or we adjourn, if that's something. So, hold on just a second, let me back up. If we get done before an hour, this is the last thing that we have to do. Can we come out and adjourn, or do we have to stay the entire hour? Or huh? What's that? You come out early and then adjourn because you're not doing any other business within that time period then, right? Because there's a deal I know that where
You can't attend to
you
any
can't
other-
attempt to do any other business if you're within that time frame.
If you come out early.
Yeah. I don't see adjourning as being a business. I just want to make sure.
You wouldn't hurt my feelings to do it at all, so.
To do what?
To adjourn without.
Okay, all right, good.
Doing business because we just sit around here like we often do and do nothing.
Right.
Wouldn't make much difference.
All right, so I'd be to go into executive session under 110(1)I, for a period of 1 hour, inviting, what's the legal, who's gonna actually be on the call with us? Tadas Casillas from, what is the legal firm again? Anna Feldman. Okay. David Getchis, Pete Palmer, and Angela Hubbard.
Second.
Motion second to go into executive session for an hour. All in favor, say aye.
All right.